Now, while the Winnipeg Jets may not be a perfectly built NHL team, almost every Winnipeg Jets fan can agree on the fact that the offense is probably the greatest strength of this team, without a doubt. Even the goaltending being as superb as it is, I definitely think almost any fan will agree with the fact that the offense is the best part about this team and what's the strongest part of it. But I want to take the time to talk about an asset that the offense has that I think is an expendable asset moving forward this season, and it actually could be a very good asset for the Jets to have, considering that this COVID world that we live in and whatnot, and how it could affect the teams moving forward that will be looking to add a little bit of an extra kick at the trade deadline this year going into the playoffs. And the player that I'm talking about in particular is expiring left winger Mathieu Perreault. Now, while I love Mathieu Perreault, and I think Mathieu Perreault has been here he's been a fantastic Winnipeg Jet for all the years he's been here now. And I don't want to, this isn't going to be a video about me shitting on Mathieu Perreault, because I think although Mathieu Perreault has had a decline in his game, especially from last year, I definitely think he's still a pretty serviceable player. Going, though, from 2018-19 from 31 points down to 15 points in 2019-20 is definitely a dip. I want to take a chance to talk about how he's looked so much different to start this season and why it might be good for the Jets to either look at trading him or re-sign him going into this next season after the one we're currently in. And although Mathieu Perreault, like I said, had a down year last year, this year he's looked like a different player to start. In 15 games played, already putting up 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. Honestly getting pretty close to his point total from last season, and it's interesting because he's looking like a lot more of the Mathieu Perreault we've seen from the past. And the reason why I think it might be worth the Jets trading him in the future has nothing to do with him, like I said, being poor play, but to the fact that he's on an expiring contract. Right now, Mathieu Perreault is making $4.125 million at 33 years old, probably his last contract that'll be anywhere near that type of money going in after this year's free agency. And while he is a serviceable player and can play anywhere in the lineup, as he's proven throughout his career, I think it could be really beneficial for the Jets to look at either trading him or thinking about signing him to a cheap extension moving forward, and why both might be a good option to weigh if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff. Now, like I said, Mathieu Perreault has had a lot more reutilized start to his career so far this season with the Winnipeg Jets, and he's been playing very solid on that third line with Adam Lowry, Mathieu Perreault, and Mason Appleton. I've really liked that third line. I've actually thought it's been one of the most consistent lines the Jets have rolled out this season, and while that's been a good line and part of the and to most of the part of Mathieu Perreault's success so far this season, if you look at where he is currently at his age, the roster spot he's taking from a younger guy developing on that third line, example Christian Vesalainen, or even for the fact that a guy like Jansen Harkins could push up into the top, into the lineup more and getting further and more playing time, I think that it would be beneficial for the Jets to think about moving him rather than keeping him. I like Mathieu Perreault, but at 4.125 and on an expiring deal, playing pretty good hockey, he's a very good asset to use. Now, the only real kicker that, in my opinion, comes down to whether or not the Jets would look at trading him at the deadline or not has to do with all this COVID stuff and all the things going on there. If you look at the trade that recently just went down between the Ottawa Senators and the the Carolina Hurricanes, the Sacred Paquette is already playing with the Hurricanes after one day after the trade. The reason for that is that in North Carolina, there is no travel restrictions or quarantines if you enter the state. You can enter it and travel freely without having to quarantine. And there are other states like that as well that have the benefit of being able to make a trade and get the player immediately. But if you look at the Canadian side of things, there aren't going to be many clubs looking to get players at the deadline that won't be able to come over and play because of the mandatory 2-week quarantine that the Canadian government has imposed to players traveling across the border after a trade. We saw it with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and we've seen how in the United States it's very different with the fact that Patrick Laine, Jack Roslovic, now Cedric Paquette, and other players are just jumping right into their new teams and their new lines and just rolling with it days after the trade instead of waiting weeks like what we've had to see with Pierre-Luc Dubois. And although I think that is a good and bad thing, and I'm not going to talk about the whole political side of COVID and all those stuff and things like that, that's going to be a big impact on teams looking to trade for assets at the deadline. And a lot of American teams could be looking at trying to snipe Canadian players that can come down and jump in immediately, especially for the fact that if Canadian teams aren't looking to get back players that are going to necessarily help them right now, and while the Jets do have a lot of offensive upside and a lot of offensive depth in their offensive core, I think Mathieu Perreault could be expendable, especially given the fact that, in my opinion, if Mathieu Perreault is to continue to trend on the way he is, the Jets could get a decent asset back for him, especially for a guy who's 33 on a $4.125 million deal expiring. It could be a good move for the Jets to look at if trading Mathieu Perreault comes down to it, especially depending on the play of other guys in the roster and whatnot and how they think it is moving forward. And the other thing that it comes down to is it worth disrupting the chemistry that we've seen so far that's built in between Mason Appleton, Perreault, and Adam Lowry on that third line? Because in my opinion, it is and it isn't worth it. I would like to see Christian Vesalainen play more, but at the same time, Mathieu Perreault is playing good hockey, so is it worth keeping a veteran guy who's been with the team for years, since 2013-14 he's been with this team, so over half a decade. And I think that it would just be very interesting to see whether or not the management looks at keeping him or trading him. If the management wants to keep him, obviously that's not going to be an expensive asset because he's going to be very, very cheap. He's not going to be making $4.125 next season. If Mathieu Perreault comes back to the Winnipeg Jets next year, it's going to be on a very reduced league minimum contract, similar to what we've already seen with Trevor Lewis, and he'll be playing fourth line minutes. Now, I would like to see that happen with Mathieu Perreault. I think it would be a good role to finally have a vet of our own that's been on the team for a long time transition into that role as a fourth line guy that Maurice likes to have, instead of us wasting cap and a roster spot to go out and get another one of a guy like that. Because although we've done that in the past, the guys Nick Shore, Letestu coming in and having these extra guys that don't need to be playing, I would prefer to see Mathieu Perreault slot down on that fourth line, because I do love the Mathieu Perreault for the fact that he spent so many years with the Jets. He's been pretty good with the Jets. He had a lot of good 40-point seasons there from 2013 to 2016, and even after that, 39 points, 31 points. He's been a very consistent player for the Jets in his career so far, and I would like to see him stay, but at the same time, if the Jets could go out and get even, say, a third-round pick for Mathieu Perreault at the deadline, if he continues to play on the up like he is right now to start this season, I think that Cheveldayoff should take a look at that and maybe consider seizing it, because even if we do trade Mathieu Perreault, if he really wants to come back, I think it could be really good for the Jets. I think it could be one of those situations where we see a guy get traded from a club and re-sign with them back in the offseason just because he wants to stay in Winnipeg, and who wouldn't at this point if you're Mathieu Perreault in his career? I think it'd be a very interesting move, and the reason why I want to talk about it is because I've actually thought for a while that Mathieu Perreault is looking to be a decent trade asset. Obviously, last year he had 15 points and was on the down at 33 years old, so I didn't think he would be that worth it. But going into this season, 7 points in 15 games, only looking better so far with the games go on, I think it could be a decent look to see if any teams would be looking to add Mathieu Perreault at the deadline if he continues to play on the uptrend. Yet again, this is just my opinion, making a video talking about a guy who's been with the club for a long time, who's been loyal to the club, and I don't necessarily think that it happens, but it's an interesting topic nonetheless to think about because of the fact that he is on an expiring contract, playing good hockey, and the fact that American teams, depending on which one they are in the States and whatnot, do not have to have that quarantine period, so they could be looking to add depth at the deadline, while Canadian teams might be looking to sell off depth because they can't bring in other guys to play. It depends on what the teams look like, where the Jets are at the deadline and whatnot. There's a lot of time in hockey to be played up until that point, but nonetheless, I still wanted to bring this topic up and see what your guys' thoughts were on it. So let me know all your thoughts on this type of topic down in the comment section below, as always. If you think Mathieu Perreault should be re-signed, if you think the Jets should look at trading him, if whatnot, let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below, as always. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you're fan of hockey, regardless of the team you root for, definitely consider dropping a subscription. It really does help the channel out a lot as we're on that road to 1K subscribers. Thank you so much for watching. Peace, love, and positivity, everybody. I will see you in the next video. Go Jets, go!